Hi, this is Professor Bonnie, and in this short walkthrough, we'll load sample Superstore Excel data. We will create simple DAX measures, such as average and sum. We'll learn a little bit about data analysis expressions, otherwise known as DAX, taking a look at the documentation, and we will make KPI cards so that we can display our key performance indicators nicely in Power BI. In Lesson 1, we did a brief walkthrough of the Power BI interface, and we connected our data using this button here. Today I'm going to connect the data again, but I'll use the Excel workbook in the ribbon just to show that there's another way to do it and that it works. Once again, we can see the orders, the returns, and the users table, and I see a preview of each. And the same issue that we encountered the first time is happening again. So we did not have our first row recognized as headers, and we could transform the data, but I'm going to show another way to do it. So this time I will load the data. And I can also transform the data from this button here. If I would have clicked transform data in the previous screen, it would have taken me right here. But in case you accidentally forgot or you realized later that you needed to transform it, you can also do it this way. So again, we're in the same screen and we see that we have column 1 and column 2 when we select the users table. And we can use this easy button right here, use first row as headers. Now we can close and apply our changes, and it will close the Power Query Editor, and now our data should be updated. And we can see we have manager and region, so it looks correct. Next, let's go to the model view where we can connect our data. We want to ensure that we have the relationships between the tables so that we can use them together. So orders and users already has region. It's connected on region. And if I enlarge that, I can see it a little better. But I also want to connect orders with returns by user ID. And then I once again get the new relationship dialog box. Everything looks okay, and I will click Save. And now I also have a relationship here between order ID, between the users and the returns table. The data visualization that we are going to do today is going to represent key performance indicators. So let's rename our Sheet tab. Just like Excel, if you click on the text 3 times, so that's a triple click, it should highlight all of the text for you to edit. And I'm calling my page KPI cards. We'll create 5 measures using basic aggregate DAX functions. The average and the sum function is what we'll use today. But before we do that, let's briefly open the official documentation to show the typical syntax, and then we can build each measure. The aggregate functions are here. So let's take a look at the average first. When we go to the documentation, we can take a look at the syntax, and we can see the function is called average. So the average of your column. And there's more information. Down at the bottom, we can see an example. So the average of the internet sales and the extended sales amount. So the syntax here, the average of the values in the column. So the extended sales amount is the column here, and it's within brackets. And then the name of the table is called internet sales. So that is here. Power BI also has some helpful behaviors to help you type this easily. Let's take a look at the sum function. It's very similar to the average function. It's going to take the sum of a column. And here we see our syntax. Supposing you have a sales table and one of your columns is amount, this would sum the amount of your sales. So let's apply that in Power BI. Up on the Home tab in the ribbon, you'll click on New Measure. It's in the Calculations group. And once we do that, we have an area to enter a DAX formula, and you'll also notice in your data pane there is a new measure called Measure. Let's rename this to Average Sales. So instead of measure equals, I have average sales equals. And then we want to use the average formula, so we would begin to type the average formula. And we can see that as I typed, it became highlighted. I can use the tab key on my keyboard, and that will open the function for me. And then it gives me more suggestions. So we want the sales in the orders table. I'm using the arrow keys on my keyboard. You could also continue to type until it matches, or you could use your mouse to select. But once it's highlighted, I can select I can press the tab key again, and then you'll see that I have the table in there. Now I can either press enter, or I can check on this green check mark to commit the function. It will close the parenthesis for me in this case, but just know that there does need to be a closing parenthesis. If I leave it off and press commit, it will work anyway. It adds it for me. And over here in the data pane, you can see that I have average sales. So we've just made our own custom measure, and let's do that again by clicking New Measure. And next we'll get total sales. For total sales, we would use the sum function. Similarly, I just begin to type it in. It becomes suggested for me, and I can press tab, and then I can look for the sales. I pressed enter this time rather than the check mark. And let's do it again. Next, I want total discounts. Now we have total discounts down here. I need to add an S there. I noticed the error. So we have total sales, total discounts, and average sales so far. Let's add another measure for total shipping costs. And finally, we'll add a measure for total profit. Now I have all of the measures that I'm going to use for KPIs in my data pane. And next we can start to add a KPI visualization, which will use KPI cards. So in the visualizations pane, hover over card, and it should read card for you. It looks like a lightning bolt with a 1, 2, 3. Once you have a box over here for your card, you can drag your measure right into there. And I'd like to change this to a dollar, like a currency format. So this is done on the data level. I'll go over to my data pane, and I can do that here in the formatting area, currency. And I'm going to use 0 decimal places. And I'll also format this card by giving it a color. I like this color, so I'll select this color. And next, if I deselect, I can add another card, and I can repeat the process. Once again, I'll change to a currency here. And I'm going to use the Format Painter. Oops, I want to undo that. I want to use the Format Painter on this one, and I can have the same format pasted over. So that makes it very easy to make your cards look similar. All right, let's add the next card. And I'm adding another card. I'm setting a currency format. I'm going to add some decimal places here because it's more meaningful than rounding it to the nearest million. Otherwise, this looks like a nice KPI display. One last little tip is just to make sure that your text is fully readable. If there's not enough space, then your container won't display all of your text. That's it for today's video. To recap, we imported and transformed data from an Excel file. We added a relationship in our data model. We were introduced to DAX expressions. We used simple DAX expressions to create calculated fields from our data. We formatted our numbers as currency, and then finally we created card visualizations to display them as KPIs.